Welcome everybody to this webinar. This is titled 5 Great New Features in P5 version 7.2. So you can see the three of us named at the bottom there. This is David Fox speaking from the UK. With me today I've got Josef in Munich from Archiware. Hi Josef.
Hi David.
Good to have you with us for the
Thank you very much.
For the big new release style webinars that you always join us for.
Yeah, I'm serious about the news, David.
Yeah, I know that. And with me today, special guest, we've got Pete from MagStor in the US. Hi, Pete.
Hello, everyone.
It's earlier in the day for Pete than it is for Josef and I, so that's bad for Pete, but not bad for us.
But
so
it
Pete's
gets
going to be
better
talking. Pete's going to be talking to us about NanoPure a little bit later on. So what we'll do now is we'll turn off our cameras so you can focus on the slides, and then we may or probably will put our cameras back on at the end of the webinar, so that you can see us answering the questions. So let's begin. I'm just going to go back to full screen. And so we're really keen to get your questions. So please type them in. Find the questions box in the software, in the web interface, however you're connecting to GoToWebinar. Type your questions in and we'll go through all of those at the end. And I'm sure there's usually quite a few questions about these kind of more technically focused webinars. So feel free to ask the questions. So let's talk about what we're going to be talking about. We've got 5 things. We've got the S3 Object Archive. So just to recap, this is all stuff that's new in version 7.2 of Archiware P5 software. That was released a couple of weeks ago. In fact, we're now on version 7.2.1. And these are the things that are new in this version. So for new customers or existing customers, this is good news. So we have number 1 headline feature is called the S3 Object Archive, which we will talk to you about in a moment. Then we have a new kind of incremental archiving feature called Incremental Plus, which is server-wide incremental archiving. Then we've got some improvements to the P5 Data Mover product. We've got some updates to the way that you can search and archive indexes. And then we've got support for NanoPure LTO Media, which is what Pete from MagStor will be talking to us about. So let's begin with the S3 Object Archive. So this is a really big change, really, I would say, for the P5 Archive product. Let me just get my pointer out. So what we can do with the S3 Object Archive is that you can configure your P5 archive server and LTO hardware, and then you can address that via an S3 server that P5 will host within the P5 software. And this S3 server can be connected to by S3 clients, and there are lots of S3 client pieces of software, MAM, archive, backup software that can all write to an S3 endpoint, which is typically going to be cloud storage. So effectively, the P5 archive server can behave the same as cloud storage from the perspective of the software that's writing to it. So you can see from my captions at the bottom, any software with the ability to write to an S3 endpoint or bucket over here, and then the P5 archive is configured to act as an S3 server. So in this graphic, I've included all the other ways that external products can talk to P5, and that is, we have a command line interface, we have a REST API, we have the ability to automatically archive folders from customer storage or manual selection of data. So the S3 interface fits among these other 4 interfaces that P5 provides. And then over on the right-hand side, the target for the objects that were being sent by the S3 clients will be LTO hardware and tapes, and those tapes can be either Archiware's native tape format or LTFS. So how is this configured? Before that, we've got just a slide where I'm saying that the S3 server that P5 provides is ultimately handing off the objects that we're receiving to tape. And that means that although you'll be able to see the objects that are in the bucket that P5 Archive is providing, if you want to access one of those objects, obviously tape doesn't allow instant restores, but that's okay because there's a service provided by Amazon Web Services called S3 Glacier Deep Archive, which is also very likely using tape. And with this S3 API call, you first of all request objects that you wish to restore, and then you come back later when the system has had time to recover them from tape, and then you can access those objects in the bucket in the usual way. So second bullet, S3 Object Archive supports the AWS S3 Glacier Deep Archive storage class. So that's what Archiware P5 Archive is supporting. And therefore object restore requests must precede the downloading of the objects from the bucket. So this is just the same way that you will interface with some very low cost cloud services, in that first of all you restore the object and then you access the object. So the way this is actually configured within the P5 interface is in a special section under the advanced options called S3 Object Archive, which will be there when you've got the P5 archive module licensed. And the setup is pretty simple. So the configuration setup consists of a target archive pool. So that you can see the target pool is selected from the drop down. This needs to be a pool with tapes in it, either P5 native format tapes or LTFS tapes, and the data will be sent to those tapes. So it's just a simple selecting of the pool. We provide the bucket credentials. So P5 is going to make a bucket with the name that you set at the top of the window, in this case P5 LTO bucket. That will be published via our S3 server. The data gets written to this pool. The credentials are provided by P5, and the secret access key can be recreated with this button here anytime. And then finally, the staging area is an area of disk where the objects will first be written as they're being received through the S3 interface, and then those objects on disk will be flushed out to LTO at intervals. And the way that those intervals works is through this quiescent time setting, which is in the advanced options tab of the configuration for the bucket. And the quiescent time, as you can see in all of the text in the UI, this is how long we will wait whilst no new objects are being received before we begin flushing the contents of our disk cache to tape. So this is going to be something that you can probably tune in some environments, but in our testing we think about 1 minute is about the right amount of time. So in the slide there you can see the quiescent time, how long P5 waits when no objects are arriving before flushing to disk. And then the retention time at the bottom is not like a backup retention, but it's purely when the objects are on disk, because they've been, in the case of a restore, they've been read from tape and they're sitting in the disk cache. How long should we leave them there for the S3 client to access them before we remove them from disk? So we have a 1-day timer there. So this is quite a big, Joseph.
Maybe you can go the slide 2 steps before. I like to add some note for the staging area.
This slide? Or
no, one.
This
one.
One.
This one. Yeah. This cache, this staging area configuration. This is important to choose a fast storage like SSD or this NVMe type of storage, because it has to be fast. Otherwise, it's taking too much time to store all this information which are coming from the S3 interface. This S3 protocol is encrypting data with MD5 checksums, and this MD5 checksum is not the best performer. So we need to do everything to make it really fast and not to consume too many time for all this hard disk operation. So it's important to put this caching staging area on SSD disks. And if you really like to host it from the internet side, then it's also very important, if you like to use it for LTFS or for LTO, that you choose at least a 5 gigabit, better a 10 gigabit network, because otherwise you also will have a problem to get really huge size of data written to the tape, because everything what is not able to ship data in at least 200 to 300 megabytes a second will drop down the speed of the LTO hardware. So there are a few things to note if you are using this interface, and maybe we, David, maybe we have to add some block to give some important hints and tips for configuring this kind of interface with P5, because the CLI and the REST interface gives already, yeah, from the way you are using it, is more an internal type of interface which the MUM systems are using. But with this S3 interface, we have a general interface which is also available from the outside. So there are some rules of configuration which are important. Okay,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
good points. And yes, we should put something up on the blog to cover all of
Yeah,
these points about this
yeah,
particular interface.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So just moving to the next slide that we had with this one. So just thinking about what this allows with P5 archive that wasn't previously possible. One really interesting feature that we're calling archive node or tape node is the fact that you can have in this diagram, I've got three separate P5 archive servers on three different locations. So the dotted lines, you could consider those to be locations, the dotted ovals. So we have a couple of P5 archive servers on the left and the right. They are taking data from storage on this site, and which needs to be archived. Same thing going over on the right-hand side. They're both writing using the S3 interface to a P5 archive server which is hosting LTO hardware, so it has tapes. So this means that you can have two independent P5 archive servers with their own archive indexes, where everything is indexed locally, but the data is being written over the S3 connection to an LTO hardware at another location. So you can basically configure LTO hardware and tapes as an archive node that's shared by archive servers within the organization at different locations. All of this requires that the interconnecting network is fast enough to achieve what we need to achieve. But this is something that we've never been able to do before with P5 Archive, and we think that's really going to be interesting for a lot of customers. And then a couple of other use cases. Did you want to add something there, Joseph?
Yeah, it's general, everything gets faster. So today, for all the media companies, 10 gig network is nothing special. So at least 20-30% have already 10 gig, and more customer have this performance on their internet side. So this setup will be general. In a few years, everybody is able to archive data over internet. And so with this kind of setup, you can centralize your archive to one dedicated location, or you can simplify it and clone it to more locations if this is required for your company. And there are a lot of different options and possibilities with this S3 interface. So it's really
Yeah.
powerful.
There's a couple more use cases on this slide. So the first bullet here says that any existing MAM that supports S3 writing to S3 Cloud can archive to LTO without writing any code integration. So right now we have quite a few MAM products that interface with P5 Archive so that they can offload assets to LTO tape, effectively archiving assets. And those MAMs integrate with P5 by writing code to integrate with our command line or our REST API interface. So those MAMs probably also support writing to S3 cloud storage, and in that case they don't need to have the integration written. They can just treat us as an S3 endpoint, configure the P5 archive correctly, and then they don't need to write any code. So that's great for updates, for S3 integrations, for MAM integrations, and for us working with new MAMs, which we're really excited to be able to do. And then the second bullet is basically customers with very large amounts of data. Let's just say, for argument's sake, 1 petabyte in the cloud. They might want to make an archive of that to LTO, but previously it would be very difficult because they'd have to copy it back to on-prem storage. They'd need a petabyte of on-prem disk storage, and then from there they can archive. So with the S3 object archive, you don't need to have that intermediate storage. We effectively are streaming through the S3 protocol directly to LTO. We have this intermediate disk storage, but we will handle when we start flushing that to tape. So you don't need to account to have a whole petabyte of disk storage available for this to happen to stream the data to tape. It's just a cache. So a fraction of that petabyte would be needed to actually get the data onto tape. So this provides a solution for people that have got a lot of data in the cloud. They'd like to have a copy of that on LTO, but they don't know how to do it. So this makes for another option for those people with that particular issue. Okay, so moving on from the S3 object archive, this of course is part of the sorry, getting my words muddled up. This is part of P5 archive. So customers that already have a P5 archive license plus ability to write to LTO, they get this S3 object archive included without any additional cost. This is part of the upgrade to 7.2. Same goes for incremental.
Dave, one additional note. It is not just related to LTO and LTFS, so it is storage open. So everything what we address with the pool, you can work with this S3 storage. So it's not just LTO. So you can, crazy it sounds, but you can archive from S3 over P5 to backblaze, an example, because only important is that it is a pool. If this is a pool, then P5 can handle this. So we can take data in and support all different types of storage in the back.
Yeah, so in this graphic, we've got tape over on the right-hand side as our storage
but
pool, because
also,
we see that as the most likely use case. But we can also write to cloud services, and we can also write to disk. So if you just wanted to use P5 archive server to get data through S3 protocol onto disk, then we could also do that. Yeah. Thanks for adding that.
Only to complete, to make it.
Yeah. So the next point that we want to talk to you about today is incremental plus archive level. So I've got a little graphic here just to illustrate. So what this means is that a file that you've archived from one piece of storage, you can move that file to another piece of storage, and the P5 archive server will track that this is the same file. It just has a new location that will be stored in our archive index, but we don't need to re-archive the file. So just to read what I've written at the bottom, once archived, a file may be moved to any storage that P5 is archiving. Example, customer moves an entire project folder to a different server. The archive index is updated with the new file locations. The files are not resaved. So this is something that previously wasn't possible. P5 archive was able to do an incremental archive, and this meant that if a file had already been archived and was tracked in our index at a particular location, then providing that file didn't change, it wouldn't be re-archived when you did an incremental archive. So what's happening with incremental plus is that that file can be moved and it will not be resaved, and the archive index will track the new location of that file. So the way this happens is there's a new incremental plus archive level that you can choose in the options section of your archive plan. So this window here is the archive plan, and this is the options tab, and this is where you can choose the new archive level. The way that it works is that P5 will assign an extended attribute to the archived file. So when we're archiving a file for the first time, we will write an extended attribute, piece of metadata, onto that file in order that we have a unique identifier that we know, and then we put it inside the file. So we know when we're seeing the same file, even if the file is in a different folder, or if the file has been renamed, the file will still retain this metadata that we can use to identify it. So the middle bullet there says that we assign this extended attribute. This requires that the file system supports extended attributes, but these days extended attributes on file systems are pretty much standard. So you'll find that this will work with most of the file systems that you're using. And then we can identify and track the file across storage locations, effectively deduplicating at a file level rather than having to resave files that are being moved. We have a lot of customers who move projects around and they're archiving their storage, and this means that there'll be a lot less activity in that archive as we're tracking the movements. And it says at the bottom that the file systems must support these extended attributes. So yeah, that's the last slide on incremental archive levels. So that's something entirely new and included in 7.2 for existing customers. Now we've got some P5 data mover improvements. So as a little bit of a recap, P5 data mover is an add-on module for customers that are doing archiving that allows them to have flexibility so that data that they already archived to LTO5 tapes, they could put into cloud storage, for example, just migrate from tape to cloud. Or most commonly, customers with those LTO5 tapes, they might want to go to a newer LTO generation from LTO5 to LTO9 maybe, so that a lot of LTO5 tapes now fit on a single tape. So P5 Data Mover allows this to happen so that those aging tapes can be dealt with. So yeah, there's some improvements to the P5 Data Mover that we'll look at. So over on the right-hand side, you can see what a migration plan looks like. And broadly speaking, a migration plan takes the source pool, which might be your LTO5 tapes, and takes the target pool, which might be those LTO9 tapes. But bear in mind, you might have several hundred tapes as part of this migration. So it's something that you have to take quite seriously, plan for, and going to need to monitor it. So what's happening in version 7.2 is, first of all, we have improvements to our filtering. So we're now in the data migration tab of the migration plan. And you can see here on 7.2, you can either not filter, so everything in the pool gets migrated. You can filter based on the archive date, which was the feature that was already there in previous versions. So you can say everything older than so many days or newer than so many days. So you could say basically everything that was archived within the last year. You could migrate that to different tape generation or to cloud storage. So the new option is this index query, which we have zoomed in on a little bit in the circle. So with index query, you can make an arbitrary query on the archive index in order to select what it is that you're going to migrate. So this could be based on a directory, it can be based on metadata. There's quite a lot you can do here. So when you're designing that filter, we have an example here where we're migrating data we have a metadata field called migration. So this is a field that we've added to our archive index, and then we're matching on some text. So we could have a migration field that we set when we're archiving, so that we can choose what we want to archive, what we want to migrate later on. And you can also, in this filter, we've got a specific path. So we have a directory 2023 data, and we're only going to migrate the data that is in that path in the archive index. So you can build a query just like searching the archive index in an arbitrary way to select what data it is that you want to migrate. So we've got this data mover module has been around for maybe, how long has it been around for, Joseph? A couple of years at this point?
Approximately 1.5.
Yeah, about 18 months. So in that period, we've had a lot of migrations with end users happening, because it's quite a, it's a big thing that a lot of customers want to do, particularly getting away from the older tape generations. And this is something that people have been requesting. So
yeah,
this is
we had a
now
lot of
implemented.
requests. Yeah.
Yeah. But the bigger thing that we've had requests for is more visibility about the migration, how the migration is going, which tapes are needed, which tapes have already been migrated. Yeah, the larger migrations take a long time and really benefit from having better tools, more insight into what's going on. So this migration overview window, which is available from a button in the migration plan, shows, first of all, the volumes that are going to need to be migrated. So you can see in this screenshot, we've got a chain of volumes, because the thing about migrating tape volumes is that we're spanning files between one tape and the next. So those files that are spanned between tape volumes need to be read in the correct order in order that that file which spans across the two volumes can be migrated. So there's something we call a chain, which is a sequence of volumes in a particular order. Now you can see all of the volumes at the bottom of this window here are showing up in red, which means that they're required for this migration. And then as this migration runs over a period of days, the window will update to show which volumes have been migrated. And also at the top, it will tell you how many files have been migrated and the total size of the migration so far. And it will progress. You can see the numbers changing, and that we have more green migrated volumes at the top. And you can also see the volumes that are still going to be needed. So the migration plan is generally it's scheduled to run out of hours, because it probably is going to tie up, in the case of this kind of migration, it's going to tie up the tape drives. So we're running it over weekends and evenings in chunks when it's possible to run it. And then as the days pass and the more data is migrated, you can keep tabs on it. The successor volume, Joseph, do you want to just tell me a little bit more about the one that's grey? Because I don't think I remember.
The successor volumes are the easiest way to explain successor volumes is that
Yeah.
if you have a volume chain and you have very large media files, and imagine you have a LTO5, an example, which is a little bit smaller than LTO8 and 9, then you could imagine that you have a film which is larger than a single volume.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts in this example, it could be start on volume 10,008 and it's finished on 10,010. So it's 10,009 is just storage. Nothing is starting on this volume. So in the archive index, the volume 10,009 is unknown because nothing is started and nothing is ending it, but it's a successor volume because it's required.
Mm-hmm.
And for this, it has another meaning for us during the operation. So it's required, but it's not that we can address data on it. So, and that's the reason that it's gray and it's not, in this case, green. So because we get not this information out of the index, we get this information out of the media management. So it's more or less good information for us, but maybe some customer could ask why this is now not green, but we explain it in all this text which we are written there. We explain why it is gray.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So as we let the migration proceed, as you can see, all the volumes are turning green, and at this point there are 0 files still to be migrated, 0 bytes, and the migration is finished.
Yeah.
The other enhancement in 7.2 is a job history window. So I mentioned earlier that the migration will run in chunks overnight, over weekends. So the migration window will show you all the jobs that have already been executed on behalf of the migration plan, so that you can track the daily process of how much data has been migrated. So we have quite a fully featured, sophisticated kind of suite of things now that the P5 archive customer can use to migrate their data. And we have a lot of migrations that have already happened and that are currently running, going from older LTO gens to newer ones, because I think in a lot of ways prior to this product being available, people were really not sure how they were going to migrate their data other than just putting it all back on disk and archiving it again from scratch. So the P5 data mover really gets people out of a hole that they were in, because it provides this suite of things that allows them to do that migration. Some customers are migrating to cloud from LTO because they want to go to cloud. They don't want to have that on-premise infrastructure. And likewise, we've got some customers that are coming out of the cloud because of the costs, and they've spent some capital on tape hardware on premise, and they're doing the complete opposite thing. So people are doing completely opposed strategies. But some people don't have the premises in which to run LTO cooling and everything else, and some do. So there's an interesting article on Archiware's blog that comparing the cost of cloud and LTO that you should take a look at if you didn't already see that, because it's quite an eye opener to see how capital expenditure in LTO versus cloud storage over the period of years and adding data into an archive, how it stacks up. Okay, so the next thing that's new in 7.2, again around the archive module, is subtree search. This is a pretty simple one. The archive index previously did allow this, and then this was removed in, I think, in version 7.1. 7.2 brings it back. Let me tell you a little bit more. So subtree search basically means we're in our archive index, which is what you can see in this screen grab. We're browsing in the archive index. We're looking for some particular file that we know the name of, maybe, but we don't want to search the whole index because the whole index is massive. We know that the file exists within a particular folder. So you can search, if I'm just highlighting the difference here, you can search in the entire index, or this folder called Ansel Nance Images, which is the currently folder that we're browsed to. So this button allows you to select the current folder and then run your name contains string cloud search just within that folder and all the subfolders, and then we get the search results. So this is faster than searching the whole index, but it's now re-engineered effectively so that whenever you're running this search, we're building the indexes necessary to perform the search on the fly, rather than having this information available in the whole index all the time, which was causing performance problems, which is why it was pulled out as a feature in the previous version, previous major version, and now it returns. Is that about right, Joseph?
Not 100%, but the main reason that we add this feature again is because people sometimes have from the data structure files and names and structure elements which are very similar. So if they are searching for something, they get thousands of file elements, and all this information are too much for the single search. So they like to reduce the number of hints by that way that they are just searching on the right place, and then they get the right hints. Otherwise, they get millions or thousands of hints, but these are too much to separate them then. So it's much more easier to go on the right place. In example, a folder name which they know already that it has to be there, and then they are searching, and then they get a corresponding number of hints. Otherwise, it's too much if they are searching the entire index. It's not that it is a speed question, because the speed to search an entire index is so extremely fast that it's not notable by the end user that it's slowing down because the number of hints. But if they are interested in a dedicated file which is stored on a dedicated place, and they are not able to find it because he is getting so many hints back, then there is a good reason to search at a dedicated place, and that's the reason that we add this feature again.
Yeah, so that you don't get an overwhelming amount of results back that you don't know what to do with it. Yeah.
And now we are creating an increment. We are creating a partial index where the user is searched, and then after this, and this index is not reused again, we will remove this index later in the background again. So it will not overload the index with this path index which we had in the history, and this was a performance killer. So now we are very fast, but so we have to create this index temporary again.
Yeah, because we have customers with hundreds and hundreds of millions of files in their indexes, and so we have to make sure that all of these features work for those customers, which means that maybe the smaller customers never had a problem with searching, but now none of the customers, regardless of their scale, will have
No, it makes it much more better than let's take.
Okay, Pete, so the last thing that we're going to talk about is NanoPure LTO Media support. So, Pete, would you like to tell us all about it?
I would enjoy that. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me today. And the origination of the NanoPure Media product, many of us at MagStor have been in the tape hardware business for 20 plus years, and we've come to understand some of the shortcomings to LTO Media And to kind of lay the groundwork for that, as many of you may know, virgin media, as it's called, or new media, which is perfectly acceptable for use. You know, Fuji's a valuable partner of ours, and we have no issues for how they ship their media, but it's not optimized for first use. And there's several key factors. One is new media has asperities and other contaminants is the word sometimes used from the production process that are not completely removed. This tape has not been run across a head on an LTO device or anything. So it's rough on your tape hardware. And part of the problem with the asperities and contaminations too is it leads to a much higher error rate on first use. Plus, as we've all come to learn too with LTO9, we have the issue of the initial calibration of the media, which can take sometimes over an hour per piece of media. And our other goal was to provide an easy way for people to monitor the health of their media performance on each backup session, because usually when the cleaning light goes off, it's too late. People need insights more advanced in the process. So we developed NanoPure Media a couple years ago. We developed our own patent pending process for burnishing the media. So that's the first step that takes place. We do use Fuji media only. We burnish the length of the tape with our patent pending process using a specially designed roller. And then we do some checks to make sure it is legitimately new media. And then we do some, as we've done the burnishing process, we do some limited reading and writing so that we can then assess the performance characteristics, both in forward and reverse, for this particular piece of media. Then we write those performance characteristics to a protected area of the cartridge memory. We also then encrypt a key so that our partners such as Archiware can validate that, hey, this is a piece of NanoPure media. So NanoPure media lengthens the LTO drive and media life while improving the reliability and operational efficiency through these things I've described. And we have a white paper that goes into great detail on this, so please contact me afterwards at pete@magstor.com if you'd like to delve deeper. But our NanoPure media has 30 to 40% lower error rates on first use as opposed to new untested media. And this reduced error correction can improve backup time significantly on first use. It does vary from cartridge to cartridge, but on average, 30 to 40% lower error rate. So that's a pretty significant improvement. And the health monitoring features, which we'll show you in a minute, built into Archiware P5 to monitor the tape quality for each backup session, so you know on an ongoing basis at a glance how your media is performing. David, let's go to the next one.
Just before we do, Pete, the reduced backup times, they're coming from the fact that without the higher quality media, the writing of the data to the tape is going to involve some blocks of data not being correctly written, that being detected in the drive, and then being rewritten, and therefore takes more time, uses more tape, right? And so this is something that's happening within the LTO drive, just regular use within the spec. Sometimes a block of data isn't written correctly and it has to be rewritten. And so if that happens less often, you've got reduced backup times. Is that right? From a layman's perspective.
I would agree. Now, LTO has a very robust error correction scheme. It's a very reliable backup method because of that. However, it does affect performance and backup times. Now, we can only test in our white paper to error rates because that's a quantifiable, measurable item that we can measure. It's a little fuzzier when we tried to actually time out the backup time comparisons. So, and it does vary from tape to tape, as I mentioned. But yes, 30 to 40% lower error rates will directly correlate to improved backup times because the error correction circuitry on the tape drive is less active.
Is less busy. Got it. So this is the UI showing the tape. Pete, would you like to tell us
So as
about
a
this, and then I'll
user,
show the other window?
as you complete sessions at a glance here, you'll get a green light if everything performed well, and a yellow light if we want to issue a caution, and a red light if there's some performance characteristics deviation. So again, what we're doing here is we're measuring the factory performance characteristics of this piece of media that we recorded at the time we prepared it against what the read quality was on the backup session. And then, as the legend shows here in the bottom right, Archiware will issue a good, fair, or bad light on that first screen. And if you dive into that volume, you can see the actual read and write quality for the cartridge. This looks like it was a read-only session, obviously, and you can see what the scoring is. So again, the bottom line is you can have an easy-to-use way to validate that you had good performance with your tape media early in the process before problems come up. And again, most of us today are archiving with tape. We're writing it once and storing it. We need to know this information to have confidence in the media for long-term use and future use years down the line, potentially.
Particularly with archive, using LTO for archive, where you're going to write the data on there and then keep it for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's I'll name names. SpectraLogic has had a version of certified media for many, many years, and we've been familiar with it. It's a good solution. However, it's only available to people within the SpectraLogic ecosystem for use. So in this way, we open up the opportunity to use certified media to protect your valuable intellectual property assets, regardless of what hardware you're using. But NanoPure Media combined with Archiware software gives you this capability, and hopefully you'll get some insights into the performance on your media before the cleaning light goes off on the drive. Now, we do commit to NanoPure Media is less expensive than other alternatives, but it is sold as a premium product. The price is less than, we try to keep it around 70 to 80% above regular new Fuji media, and we have some promotions going on right now. So I'd encourage anybody who has more interest in NanoPure Media to just reach out to me at pete@magstor.com or go to our website at magstor.com. We can share discount codes and share the white paper, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and we've got a slide in a moment with the URL and your email address for people to make a note of, and we'll email you the details as well to everybody that's attended or registered for the webinar. So yeah, thanks, Pete. That's really interesting. Maybe we'll get some questions and talk about that a little bit more. Just to wrap up, a few miscellaneous things in boxes. So over on the left-hand side, LTO over Ethernet is becoming a thing. Don't know if you knew that, but there's a couple of products that are on the market or about to be. One is Atto's Extreme Core Bridge. So you may be familiar with like Thunderbolt 3 to SAS bridges and such similar products from Atto. The Extreme Core Bridge is basically an Ethernet to SAS device so that you can use the iSCSI protocol to talk to the tape drive. So this is Ethernet over, or rather LTO over Ethernet. There are also products from Simply under the Ethernet LTO banner that you'll find on Simply's website that that use the Atto tech internally and provide Ethernet ports on tape devices directly. So this is something that Archiware supports. We've tested on Mac and Mac OS and Windows operating systems using iSCSI negotiators. I think they're called negotiators. Yeah, and this kind of makes the tape drive connection much more flexible because production companies, post-production VFX, they often have 10 gig, 50 gig Ethernet networks wired in the building. So that means that you can then put a tape library or a tape drive onto the Ethernet and then just hook the P5 server up to talk to it without having that direct fiber channel or SAS cable running between the host and the tape hardware. Also opens up more possibilities for virtualization of P5 while still having a tape endpoint to write to. So that's LTO over Ethernet. In the middle, of course, in 7.2, we're bringing all of the latest operating system support. For instance, the latest version of Mac OS, Windows, FreeNAS, and so on. We're a little bit slow getting onto the Synology store. Specifically, you can no longer sideload P5 or do a manual installation onto the latest QNAP operating system. So we have to wait a while before 7.2 is available in the QNAP store. So bear that in mind if you're planning to do an upgrade and you've got Synology devices in your infrastructure. It might be a bit longer you need to wait before 7.2 shows up in Synology's store. It's been submitted, but there's quite a long latency before it's showing up. And finally, over on the right-hand side, enhanced S3 connections. Our ability to connect to S3 endpoints as opposed to being an S3 endpoint is now enhanced. We're now supporting signature version 4 algorithm in our generic S3 connector, which means that we are better able to connect to on-prem S3 object storage, which is becoming much more popular. So many more companies are now deploying object storage in their premises to be addressed via the S3 protocol rather than just going via more sort of legacy protocols. Okay, so final slides because we've just gone past 3/4 of an hour, so we need to hurry up a bit. Get your trial evaluation from archiware.com /download P5 will get you the latest version. More information about NanoPure from MagStor at magstor.com/ and there's the URL. And then we've got Pete at magstor.com who's there on email to get hold of that white paper and to find out more about special offers on the media and maybe just have a chat with to learn a bit more. So with that, we're going to go and see if any of you guys have any questions that you're asking us. So I'm going to go look, and please now be typing in your questions if you have any. So we've got a question from Jiri, who's asking when the ISO, and he's listed a specific ISO/IEC 20919:2021 LTFS standard will be implemented in Archiware. Let me just highlight that one to make sure I see the whole question. Yeah, and then a follow-up, is it possible to access the archive via NFS v4? Okay, so Josef, can you tell us anything about this ISO LTFS standard and implementation of it?
No, we have to know to mark this question as unanswered, and I will answer this later. So
okay,
I never heard about it. Yeah.
No, so we have your email address, Jiri, so we'll come back to you on that one directly. Yeah. And then follow up, is it possible to access archive via NFS v4? So the answer to that is no. So I'm assuming that you want to access, I'm assuming that he wants to access his archive index as a file system via NFS, because the question is it possible to access the archive via NFS?
Yeah, but maybe he just wants to know if he can archive data which is available by NFS4, and this is sure it's possible.
Yeah, so if it's NFS4 source data that you want to archive,
sure,
then
absolutely,
absolutely, that's fine. Yeah. So hopefully that's all clear. Mick is asking, I'm interested in S3 object archive. Can I use HDD staging area? Full stop. So Joseph, you were talking about the need to have fast storage so that the objects can be received and flushed quickly.
He can use an HDD as a staging area place, but I wouldn't use it because, as I said, it's if you really want to archive to LTFS or to
Mm.
LTO, you need a fast storage, and an HDD is not the fastest storage which is available. So I would definitely recommend just to use SSDs for it.
Yeah, and SSDs are so cheap
Yeah,
these days.
there's yeah,
Terabyte SSD, even the better
yeah.
quality ones are still, crazy money
If
compared to what
if
they
in
were five
example,
years ago.
if he have to use HDD, which I don't see a reason for it, but if he has to use it, then I would say, okay, I will I will prolong this frequent of archiving from
Mm,
1 minute maybe to 15 minutes or to 20 minutes, so that we are
mm,
storing information for a longer time.
yeah.
Otherwise, the data gets so slow stored to the staging area that we just archive one file, then we have to wait again a few minutes for the next file, and then the next archive job is starting, and we are then in start stop mode again. And yeah,
Mm.
I wouldn't run it with a HDD, and because
No, because the
you
thing to
tolerate
remember is that you've got
it's so cheap.
the tape drive is going to be going at 400 megabytes a second, so you need
Yeah,
something that can stream the data
yeah,
at that speed. Yeah.
yeah.
George is
It's not that
asking.
important, David. It's not that important than in the past, because the shoe shine effect is not longer there. So with
Mm,
LTO 6, 7, and 8, they did a lot of improvements, and they are just slowing down the speed
hmm
of the recording. So it's not that important that you have really a fast connection, but it's still not a good idea to stress this too much.
Okay, I wasn't aware that the shoe shine had been something that had been dealt with in the hardware, so that's
Yeah,
interesting. I'll have to
they
read up
have
on
big buffers inside, and they are dropping down the motor speed, and the recording speed is slowing down. It's not stopping; it's slowing down.
it. Okay, I've got a question from George. Reading what he's written, any extra security options for maintaining slash securing the database index regards large S3 storages are unable to restore because they are encrypted hyphen bricked dot dot dot. I'm not quite sure. Um, you might want to, I'm not quite clear on what you're asking, George, so maybe write a little bit more. But broadly speaking, yes, the archive databases that store information about every file that you've archived, maybe over many years across hundreds of tapes, these are obviously can potentially be quite large, and you don't want to lose them. So there are features directly within P5 that allow you to replicate those indexes every day to other disk storage across your network. So you should definitely be doing that to secure them. But we would also recommend that they're backed up as part of a backup workflow as well. So it's really important. I've been thinking we need to do a blog post about the importance of
Yeah,
securing archive
that's a good
indexes
idea
and the
then. Yeah.
ways to do that. Yeah. Question on the NanoPure topic. Where can it be purchased? Where can NanoPure be purchased in the UK? That's one from Sam. Pete, how do
Yeah,
people
Sam.
purchase the media
Just
from faraway places?
go to our website. We ship to Europe in 2 days.
Okay, that's pretty quick. Yep,
Yeah, lifetime warranty too.
excellent. Last question that I'm going to read out because we're running up to an hour now is from Bob. He says, is MD5 necessary when receiving objects via S3? I think
Yes.
that's part
Standard.
of the S3 protocol, is
Yeah.
that the receiving S3 server returns an MD5 hash back to the sender, and the sender can then compare that and make sure that it's okay. So MD5 is quite old tech. It's quite slow on CPUs versus
It's slow
faster.
tech.
Yeah, it's slow tech. So yeah, MD5 is a bit of a pain for that reason because it's quite computationally expensive, but it is still required by the protocol. I think there are some extensions that will allow for other hashes to be used, so that might change over time. But for the time being, yeah, that is required, Bob. Okay, so I don't see any other questions coming in George is clarifying accessing the S3 archive tapes when die DB index are dead. I think you need to get in touch with support at archiware.com, George, because it looks like you're describing an issue that you have, and we're better off addressing that through a support ticket. So get in touch. Okay, so with that, we're going to wrap up. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, David.